Yeah, we got the Samsung American style fridge freezer, and I've just made a video about it which follows this section. But I've got an announcement to make at the moment, is that throughout the video I was suspecting it was the heating element, the defrost heating element in the refrigerator side. But the heater actually turned out to be good, although I did buy a spare one. The cause of the problem was the evaporation heater in the back, with the water that runs off the frozen ice that's changed to water by the defrost heater runs out the back into a trough, and there's a heater in that trough, and that heater is designed to evaporate the defrosted condensate to keep your fridge frost free. Okay, it just puts the water back into the atmosphere rather than letting it trickle over the floor or needing a drain pipe. But what happened in ours was it was a similar fault to a heater actually blowing, but it wasn't actually the heater. What we were seeing was that the water wouldn't come out, and the serpentine water cooler was frozen, as you'll see in the video. And it turned out to be the drain hole in the bottom underneath the refrigeration evaporator, the actual heat exchanger, was blocked, and the water backing up subsequently sealed in, and it was just filled up and up and up, and then in the end it turned into a massive block of ice, which the evaporation, the defrosting heater couldn't cope with, basically. So after a good defrosting and a poking out the hole, the problem that you see illustrated and highlighted in the next part of the video was actually cured. Okay, so that's that. So it wasn't the heater, as I mentioned in the video, but it was the, you need to check the heater obviously, but if your heater is good, then just make sure that run some water down the drain hole and make sure it's clear. I couldn't find the evaporator heater listed anywhere for these, so I've left it off at the moment in the hope that it will just evaporate anyway. But this is the full service manual. It's on the internet. If you need a copy, let me know. But anyway, the rest of the video follows. But the conclusion was that it was the drain hole behind the cover that covers the heat exchanger for the refrigerator. Okay, so good luck with yours. Video follows.
Got our fridge here. It's a Samsung fridge freezer, American style, freezer one side, fridge the other. And I've owned this since 2001, and it's been very reliable, but it's only had a couple of faults on it, which I fixed. Recently, when we pressed the water dispenser, you can basically hear a slight click, but no water is coming out. So the filtered water is not coming out, but the ice is working okay. The ice dispenser is working, so there's water supply to the fridge freezer. And I've just had the back off, and then at the back there's an engineering panel right at the bottom, and checked the valve. And what I did, I disconnected the pipe that goes up to here and operated this lever, and the water spray came out the valve. So it's not the valve, and in fact I suspected it was the valve because they're widely for sale on eBay for about 50 quid. There's 2 solenoids and 2 valves, and they take the 6mm water pipe in to one input and then 2 outputs, one to the ice dispenser, one to the water dispenser. Anyway, so I checked that there was 240 volts when I pressed the water lever, so it's just literally a line to the live supply through the switch on here down to the solenoid. So it's a 240 volt solenoid, and when you press that lever it should get mains voltage across it. It's only held on one screw, so it's very easy to remove. But anyway, the solenoid is good, and actually if you can hear a slight buzzing when you press the button, then the first and easiest thing to check without emptying the freezer, because we've emptied all the food from ours and put the frozen stuff in the freezer outside, is to in here at the base, that thing you can see down there, that trombone section if you want to call it, is the water cooler, and that's a reservoir of cold water which is strapped, is bolted onto the front using these 2 lugs, one down there and one down there. Okay, now it's frozen. Okay, so there was a build-up of ice around it and it's frozen, and so the water can't get through. The problem is that when this freezes, when you press, this is normally just full of water under normal pressure. The outlet pipe under here, a very small pipe under there, is open to the atmosphere, so that all the pressure that this thing is subject to is just the head of water up to this point up here, so there's no pressure in there. But when it freezes, you hit this, and if the input pipe is insulated, you can see, and it's a little more in the drift. This plastic trombone section is subject to the full mains pressure when you press that if it's frozen, and they split. So this one has split because I noticed a little bit of water coming out just now when I pressed the button, so I've got a repair to do on that. I might heat weld it or use silicone, I haven't decided yet. But onto the root cause of this is likely to be in the back of there is the twin cooling. It's the heat exchanger with the cold liquid HCFC in it to cool the fridge, and also in there is a thermistor, and also in there is a heater, and the purpose of the heater is to melt any ice that's built up on the heat exchanger, and then that water then runs down the back of the through a drain hole and is evaporated. And I think what's happened before is that we've had the heating element go, and so this doesn't defrost any longer. It gets caked up with ice, the ice buildup continues and then freezes, and it reduces the efficacy of the fridge. And also on this occasion it's frozen our water cooler as well. Now that's defrosting in a bucket of hot water. I've had a heater in there this morning, and I'm about to take this cover off, removing that cover there, and from memory there's two screws, one screw down there in the corner underneath. You can see that little archway, there's a screw under there and a screw across on the other corner. I'm going to take that cover off, and then just before I put it back together, I got a feeling that defrosting this will temporarily solve the problem, but the problem will come back if that defrost heater element is open circuit. It could be the control, but it's usually the element. So I'm going to clean the fridge. A lot of build up of stuff in our fridge, you can see that it's a working fridge. Yeah, I'll take that cover off and then we'll have a look at the element. But the upshot is, if you've got no water coming out and you can hear a click and a faint buzz in a quiet room, the chances are your solenoid are probably okay and it's this problem. So whip off the front cover, pull the drawers out, and then you'll see the trombone, and if the trombone is frozen, clearly you get no water. So I've got a repair on the trombone to do because it's split due to the water pressure. Then take that cover off and have a look under there, and I'll get back to you. So I've taken the top section off. There's a screw here and a screw there. There's a front cover that goes over the lights, and then you have to unplug from behind. There's a couple of plugs which you remove to get that center section. I'm not entirely sure it's necessary to remove this bit. This bit goes over here in the back of the fridge. You can see there's the back of the fridge with it removed now. I can't turn the lights on, can't I? I've got the ring main off at the moment because the plug is concealed behind the back of there, so I have to switch off the ring main in this kitchen. Yeah, so there's the cover, and there's the 4 screws I talked to you about. The cover's off, and I'm trying to remove this cover to go behind to check the thermistor and also check the heating element hasn't gone open circuit, because this shouldn't ice up. As I said before, there's supposed to be a cycle from this freezer that switches the refrigeration off and energizes the heater to melt any ice that's formed on the heat exchanger, and if it doesn't, the heater isn't working, it just builds up. So yeah, so I've taken 2 screws. It still won't come out. I think it's important to make sure this is defrosted properly. I've got a Dyson heater blowing in here at the moment, but there are some retaining, there's the screws, but when you pull it, it won't come out. There's a retaining clip there, a retaining clip there, and also there's a retaining clip down here and down here above these pillars. Okay, so I'm going to get a couple of pairs of grips and grab hold of those pillars and see whether she'll come out or not, and I'll show you what's underneath if she does. Alright, so I'm just defrosting the heat exchanger. It was a solid block of ice and the front cover would not come off. It was frozen solid and the plastic covers would not shift because it was connected to the inside polystyrene part with the fan mounted on it. So it's taken some time to, I think if you're not in a hurry and your food's not wasting, then just open the door and leave it for 2 or 3 days and then it should be okay. But otherwise, I need to get this back in service, so I'm using a heater. But this is the last of the block of ice I've just taken out from behind, and it was like that, a complete sheet, probably 2-3 kilos of ice at least. So yeah, so it's defrosting now, so you can see it's going to be a bit rusty, and I think the drain holes down in these corners down there, and down there, and clearly they're blocked up, I think, also water build up. But the suspect at the moment is the defrosting element, which is, yeah, this black tube, U-shaped tube with a wire going in, is the element which runs in the front of the heat exchanger, clipped to the aluminium fins, and terminates down there. And at the moment mine's reading 500 ohms, but I'm thinking that's probably partially open circuit. But I do know from experience this heater has gone before. This defrost heater that on the heat exchanger has gone before, and it will run for 3 or 4 days quite happily. So I'm going to check the resistance, quickly put it back together, and then order the new defrosting heater for the front of the fridge. But yeah, it was just completely baked with ice, and the reason the water had stopped is that the reservoir, serpentine reservoir for the cold drinking water on the front of the refrigeration panel was frozen solid. So there you have it. So yeah, I hope you found that interesting and useful. Yeah, this is what the heating element looks like. This is the defrost element for the thawing element for the refrigerator side of the Samsung fridge freezer. It's clamped onto the front of the heat exchanger, and when the heat exchanger is having air blown over it, it circulates the air inside the refrigerator side, not the freezer. It yeah, the moisture condenses onto the heat exchanger, which is basically a coil with fins on, and then it ices up. So periodically the fridge, the controller, turns this heating element on. You can see the power comes in here. There's two connectors on here. One is the power supply, the other one goes to the external water tray evaporator. There's another heater in the back which runs the evaporator, which heats the water up in the back of the fridge and causes it to dissipate into the atmosphere, basically evaporate, so that the rear tray doesn't get filled up and don't get puddles on the floor. But this one, when this goes, you find your fridge every 2 or 3 days comes up with an error. And you may find your fridge is not working very well either as well. The temperature might creep up, and what it is this element goes open circuit, and then ice builds up on the evaporator, on the heat exchanger, and as the ice builds up it prevents the air making full contact with the cold fins, and the ice builds up and builds up and builds up until eventually the fridge hardly works at all. And you can get by for a few weeks by just switching off and switching back on, and that resets the fridge. Switch it off for half an hour, switch it back on, and the fridge will carry on working. But as this ice builds up more and more, you'll end up with a solid block of ice in the fridge. And the problem is with when the ice is built up, you can't really easily take it apart, and it's insulated at the front, so you have to wait a long time, nearly a whole day with a heater blowing on it to get the thing apart to change this element. So it's quite a common failure from what I can make out, and it's just literally clipped. I showed you in the other clip where it was fitted, but these are about £12, 15 euros stroke from eBay, and most of the old Samsung American style fridge freezers certainly use them. I don't know about the other ordinary refrigerators, but the frost free will have a heating element somewhere in it. Okay, so if your fridge is playing up and every 2 or 3 days it comes up with an error, you can turn it off and clear it, but the fridge isn't really working very well, the refrigerator side, then just take the front off like in the video and check the resistance of this. I'll just tell you what the resistance of this one. This is a brand new one which I bought, which I didn't need, and the resistance is gonna be, if you want to check it to make sure that yours is actually working. And I know this is slightly different to the last one I bought, because I measured the last one I bought and it was 380 ohms, the last one. And this one is measuring, let's get the connector again. It's over 200 ohms, let's put it on 2K range. 526 ohms basically. So yeah, this one's 526, but the one that's in the fridge and is working at the moment is 390, so they are quite variable. It's not surprising really, there's no real control on this. I guess this is just an aftermarket part made in some Chinese factory somewhere for a few dollars. But the first one of these, the original one that was with the fridge, lasted 2004, 2017,
So 13 years before it went, and then I put the new one in, and it's been alright ever since. There has been another problem, but I'll explain that in the rest of this video. So anyway, that's the Element. Thought you might find it interesting. If you've got a Samsung fridge freezer, refrigerator side, and the refrigerator side is playing up, and every few days you get an error message, then take the front off and have a look and check this Element to make sure it's working. Okay.